The shuttle doors opened with a soft hiss, and Commander Park stepped onto Orbital Station 9 for the first time. The air smelled different here, filtered and recycled 1,000 times over. She carried only a small bag over her shoulder. Everything she needed was already inside her: years of training, decades of discipline, and the weight of 10,000 generations of warriors who came before her. The Galactic Military Academy spread before her like a small city floating in space. Tall spires of silver metal reached toward the stars. Walkways made of glass hung between buildings, and through them she could see cadets of every shape and size moving to their classes. Some walked on 2 legs like her. Some floated. Some crawled on 6 limbs. This was where the galaxy sent its best young soldiers to learn the art of war. And now Earth had sent her. A tall figure waited at the end of the landing platform. He stood 3 meters high, his body covered in plates of natural armor that looked like dark stone. His name was, and he was the senior combat instructor at the academy. When he spoke, his voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Commander Park," he said, bowing his massive head slightly. "Welcome to 9. I will show you to your quarters." Bowed back, "Thank you, senior instructor. I am honored to be here." They walked together through the station, moved slowly so she could keep pace with his long strides. All around them, cadets stopped to stare. She heard whispers in languages she did not understand, but her translator caught some of them. "That's the human instructor. She's so small. Why did they send a human to teach combat?" Kept her face calm. She had expected this. Humans were not respected in galactic military circles. Earth was known as a death world, a planet of extreme conditions where everything wanted to kill you. But humans themselves were seen as weak. No natural armor like the, no 4 arms like the, no ability to float like the. Humans were soft, slow, and fragile. At least, that is what the galaxy believed. Showed her the training halls along the way. Through wide windows, she watched cadets practicing with weapons she had never seen before. Plasma shields flickered with blue light. Gravity manipulation fields let fighters float and spin in midair. Neuralink combat systems allowed 2 opponents to fight in a shared mental space. "Impressive technology," said. "The Academy has the finest equipment in the known sectors," replied. There was pride in his voice, but also something else. A hint of curiosity, perhaps, about what this small human could possibly teach his students. The orientation assembly took place that evening in the Grand Hall. Over 500 cadets sat in rows that curved around a central stage, stood beside as he introduced her to the crowd. "This cycle, we welcome an exchange instructor from Earth," announced. "Commander Park will teach traditional Terran combat techniques. I expect you to show her the same respect you show all instructors." A ripple of amusement passed through the crowd. Saw cadets nudging each other, hiding smiles behind their hands or claws or tentacles. One young in the front row raised one of his 4 arms. "Senior instructor," he said, "with respect, why would we learn primitive physical techniques? We have technology that makes such methods unnecessary." More laughter from the crowd. Shifted uncomfortably, but stepped forward before he could respond. "Your name, cadet?" she asked. The said proudly, "Of the noble house of." "Cadet," said, her voice quiet but clear. "Technology can fail, ships can lose power, weapons can malfunction, shields can break, but your body will never leave you. Your body will remember what your tools have forgotten." The hall grew quiet, looked uncertain, unsure whether he had been insulted or taught something. Before he could respond, another cadet spoke up. "Humans have no natural weapons," she said. This one was like, but younger with sharper features. "No armor, no venom, no telepathy. What can you possibly teach us that we cannot learn better from our own species?" "Your name?" asked. "Niece of senior instructor." Nodded slowly. "Cadet, you are correct. Humans have no natural weapons. We evolved on a world that tried to kill us every single day. We had no claws to fight predators, no shells to hide inside, no wings to escape, and yet we survived. We did not just survive, we became the apex predators of our world. She paused. Perhaps there is something worth learning in how we did that. Said nothing, but her eyes were hard and dismissive. After the assembly walked back to her quarters alone. The station's corridors were quieter now, lit by soft blue lights that mimicked starlight. As she passed a training room, she heard voices inside. Did you see the human instructor? My combat drone is bigger than her. This is going to be easy credits. Show up, do some stretching, collect the attendance points. I heard Earth training is just running and lifting heavy things. How primitive can you get? I give her 2 weeks before she requests a transfer. Laughter echoed through the door. Stopped walking. She stood perfectly still for a long moment, her reflection barely visible in the polished metal wall. Then, very slowly, she smiled. They would learn, they always did. She continued walking to her quarters, her footsteps silent on the cold floor. Tomorrow, the real lessons would begin. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she could already feel it. The old fire that had kept her ancestors alive through ice ages and famines and wars and plagues. The fire that whispered one simple truth. Humans were never the strongest, but humans were always the last one standing. 2 weeks passed, and classes became a joke throughout the academy. Every morning she stood in Training Hall 7 and waited for her students. They came late if they came at all. They yawned through her explanations. They laughed at her exercises. When she asked them to hold a simple stance for 5 minutes, they complained that their species was not built for such things. When she asked them to breathe in certain patterns, they said their respiratory systems were different. They had an excuse for everything. Remained patient. She corrected their forms gently. She explained the purpose behind each movement. She told them stories of Earth warriors who had used these techniques to defeat enemies twice their size. But the cadets did not listen. To them, she was just a small human playing at being an instructor. One morning, only 12 cadets showed up out of 40 registered students. Was among them, sitting in the back with her arms crossed over her chest plates. She never participated. She only watched, her eyes full of quiet contempt. Today, said, we will practice falling. Falling, one of the cadets repeated. Why would we practice falling? The goal is to not fall. The goal, replied, is to survive. And sometimes, surviving means knowing how to fall without breaking. A warrior who fears the ground has already lost half the battle. But the cadets only shook their heads and whispered to each other. Another useless human lesson. After class, walked to the observation deck that overlooked Arena Prime. This was the Academy's main combat demonstration hall, a massive circular space with floors made of reinforced stone. The stone was legendary. It could withstand plasma weapons, gravity hammers, and even small explosions. Champions had fought here for 300 years. She stood at the window and watched a group of senior cadets sparring below. They moved with incredible speed and power. A student shattered a training dummy with a single strike. A cadet blocked attacks from 4 directions at once with her 4 arms. A fighter floated through the air, avoiding every blow like smoke avoiding a hand. Impressive, are they not? Turned, had joined her at the window, his massive form casting a shadow across the floor. Very impressive, she agreed. They have trained hard. They are the best of their generation, said. Some of them will become fleet commanders. Others will lead ground invasions. A few might even join the Galactic Council's personal guard. He paused. I mean no disrespect, Commander Park, but I have heard the reports from your classes. The cadets do not take your training seriously. I know. Perhaps, hesitated. Perhaps it would be better if you taught theory instead of practice. Military history, strategic thinking. Humans are known for their tactical minds, if nothing else. Shook her head. I was sent here to teach combat. I will teach combat. The cadets will never respect you unless you show them something they cannot dismiss, something that proves Earth training has value. And if I do show them something, looked down at her with his ancient eyes, then perhaps things would change. That afternoon, entered Training Hall 7 to find waiting for her. The young stood in the center of the room with 3 other cadets behind her. Her stone-like plates seemed to glow under the training lights. Human said, "I have a proposal." "I am listening." "You say Earth training has value. You say humans survive their death world through skill and technique. Prove it." She stepped forward. "Show us something impressive, something that matches the combat arts of real warrior species." Remained calm. "What did you have in mind?" Smiled and turned to the wall. She walked to a reinforced training dummy, the kind designed to take punishment from warriors, and took her fighting stance. Her body coiled like a spring. Then she struck. The sound was like thunder. Her fist cracked against the dummy's chest plate and the metal crumpled inward. Deep fractures spread across the surface. The dummy, which had survived 1,000 training sessions, fell backward in pieces. "That is the stone breaker," said, turning back to. "Every warrior learns it from childhood. Our bodies are natural weapons, Commander. Our strength comes from our bones." She stepped closer, towering over the small human. "Surely Earth has something worth seeing, something that can match the stone breaker." The other cadets laughed. Word had already spread through the station. More cadets were gathering at the doors, eager to watch the human fail. Looked at the destroyed dummy, then she looked at the growing crowd. "You want a demonstration," she said quietly. "Yes. Something impressive. If you can manage it." Nodded slowly. "Very well, but not here. This training hall is too small." She turned toward the door. "Request access to Arena Prime. Tomorrow evening, I will show you what Earth training can do." The crowd murmured in surprise. Arena Prime was reserved for championship matches and official demonstrations. No human had ever performed there. Smile grew wider. "Arena Prime, you are either very confident or very foolish." "Perhaps both," said. "We will find out tomorrow." She walked through the crowd and out the door. Behind her, the whispers began immediately. By dinner time, the entire station knew about the challenge. By midnight, over 400 cadets had requested seats in Arena Prime. They expected entertainment. They expected to watch a human embarrass herself in front of the galaxy's finest warriors. They had no idea what was coming. In her quarters that night, sat in silence and closed her eyes. She breathed in slowly, then out. Her hands rested on her knees, palms up, fingers relaxed. This was the old way, the way her grandmother had taught her, the way her grandmother's grandmother had taught before that. Tomorrow she would show them, not to prove herself, not to win their approval, but because they needed to understand something important. The galaxy was full of strong species, but strength alone had never been enough to rule a death world. Only the relentless survived Earth, only those who refused to break. And breaking, that was something Park had never learned how to do. Arena Prime was full. Stood in the entrance tunnel and listened to the noise of the crowd. 400 voices speaking in a dozen languages, all waiting to see what the human would do. Through the tunnel opening, she could see the curved rows of seats rising up toward the ceiling. Blue lights illuminated the massive space. The reinforced stone floor stretched out like an ocean, smooth and ancient and unbreakable. Appeared beside her. His stone plates clicked softly as he moved. "You do not have to do this," he said quietly. "If you fail here in front of everyone, your position at the academy will be finished." "I know." "Then why?" Looked up at the giant, "Because they need to see, not for my pride, for theirs. They believe strength is everything, but strength without understanding is just violence." She paused. "I am not here to prove humans are strong. I am here to show them what strength cannot do." Said nothing, but something in his eyes changed. A flicker of respect, perhaps, or at least curiosity. Stepped out of the tunnel and walked onto the arena floor. The crowd fell silent. She wore simple training clothes, loose pants, a fitted shirt, no armor, no shields, no technology of any kind. Her feet were bare against the cold stone. She had removed her translator's audio dampeners, which meant she could hear every whisper, every laugh, every muttered insult from the stands. She stood in the center of the arena and waited. Academy director watched from the observation deck above. She was ancient and wise, her body floating gently above her chair. She had lived for 600 years and had seen warriors from every corner of the galaxy. She said nothing, but her eyes never left the small human on the floor below. "I need a volunteer," said. Her voice carried clearly through the arena's sound system. "Someone to attack me with full force." Laughter rippled through the crowd, stood up immediately from the front row and jumped down onto the arena floor. Her landing shook the stone beneath her feet. "I will volunteer," she said, cracking her knuckles. Each crack sounded like breaking wood. "Try not to die, human." Nodded, "Attack when ready." Wasted no time. She charged forward with the speed of a falling boulder, her right arm already pulled back for a devastating strike. The crowd gasped at her speed, even for she was fast. But when her fist reached the space where had been standing, it found only air. Had moved, not backward, not to the side. She had moved around's arm like water flowing past a stone. Her body twisted and shifted, and suddenly she was beside the untouched. Spun and attacked again, a sweeping strike that could have broken a wall, but again was not there. She slipped beneath the arm, rose behind, and was standing calmly 3 meters away before the could turn. "Stop running," shouted. "Fight me." "I am fighting you," replied. "You simply have not noticed yet." The crowd had gone quiet. This was not what they expected. The human was not blocking. She was not counterattacking. She was simply not being hit. Attacked again and again. Each strike was powerful enough to shatter bones, crack armor, destroy anything in its path. But each strike missed, moved like smoke, like shadow, like something that was not quite solid. She never met force with force. She simply was not where the force arrived. "Earth gravity is 1.4 times galactic standard," said calmly, still evading. "We grew up being pulled toward the ground harder than any of you. We learned to fall early. We learned to move with weight, not against it. Our predators were faster and stronger, so we learned to make their speed and strength work for us." Was breathing hard now. Sweat dripped from her stone plates. She had never missed so many times in her life. "This is called redirection," continued. "On Earth, we have many names for it, but the principle is simple. You cannot stop a river by standing in front of it, but you can guide where it flows." She demonstrated, threw a massive punch, and this time touched her arm, just a light touch, barely visible, and suddenly was stumbling sideways, thrown off balance by her own momentum. "Your strength is real," said, "but strength without control is just energy waiting to be used by someone else." Stood still, chest heaving, eyes wide. The arena was completely silent. Then raised her voice. "I need more volunteers, 5 of you, any species, attack together." For a moment no one moved. Then Cadet jumped down from the stands, followed by 2 more and 2 fighters. They spread out around in a circle, 5 warriors surrounding one small human. "Begin," said. They attacked simultaneously. 5 directions, 5 different fighting styles, 5 sets of natural weapons. It should have been overwhelming. It should have ended in seconds. But moved through them like wind through leaves. She ducked under a 4-armed assault and used his momentum to push him into a charge and let the warrior crash into. She flowed and spun and redirected, never stopping, never standing still, turning every attack into a weapon against the attackers. In 30 seconds, all 5 cadets were on the ground, tangled together, confused and exhausted. Stood among them, breathing slowly, untouched. The crowd sat in stunned silence, looked up at them. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with something old and fierce. "This is Earth training," she said. "We do not try to be stronger than our enemies. We learn to make our enemy's strength destroy itself." From the observation deck, Director leaned forward. Her ancient face showed an expression she had not worn in centuries. Interest, but was not finished. She looked at the fallen cadets, then at the crowd, then at the reinforced stone beneath her feet. "You wanted to see something impressive," she said. "Something that matches your stone breaker." She walked to the center of the arena and stood alone. "I will show you what 10,000 generations of human warriors created, not to match your strength, but to break through it." The crowd held its breath and began to breathe. The arena fell into absolute silence. Stood in the center of the reinforced stone floor, alone, small, impossibly calm. Around her, the 5 cadets she had defeated slowly picked themselves up and moved back to the edges of the arena. Stayed where she was, watching the human with new eyes. In the stands, 400 cadets leaned forward. Even those who had come to laugh were now silent. Something was happening, something none of them understood. From the back of the crowd, a young human cadet named watched with his heart pounding in his chest. He was one of only 3 humans at the academy, and he had spent his entire time here being mocked, pushed aside, called weak and primitive. He had never seen a human instructor before. He had never seen anyone from Earth stand in arena prime. He was terrified for her, and at the same time, for the first time in months, he felt something like hope. Began to breathe. It was not normal breathing. It was deep and slow, rhythmic and controlled. Each breath seemed to fill not just her lungs but her entire body. Her stomach expanded, then her ribs, then her chest. Then she released the air just as slowly, emptying herself completely before beginning again. The crowd, who were sensitive to energy fields, noticed something strange. The air around was changing. It was becoming denser, heavier, as if gravity itself was gathering around her small form. "What is she doing?" someone whispered. No one answered. Continued breathing. 1 minute, 2 minutes. The crowd grew restless, confused. Was this the impressive technique? Breathing. Then she moved. Her feet shifted on the stone floor, sliding into a stance that no one in the arena recognized. Her weight dropped low. Her knees bent. Her back straightened. Her hands rose slowly, fingers together, palms facing down. "This technique," she said, her voice quiet but somehow reaching every corner of the arena, "is called Pa. In my ancestors' language, it means sky splitter." The crowd murmured, "Sky splitter? What kind of name was that for a combat technique?" "It was created over 1,000 years ago," continued. "On Earth, we had no natural weapons, no armor, no claws, so we learned to make weapons from ourselves. Not our muscles, those are weak compared to most species. Not our bones, those break too easily. We learned to make weapons from something deeper." She paused. Her breathing had changed again. It was shorter now, sharper, like the breathing of a predator about to strike. "We learned to make weapons from everything at once. Every muscle, every bone, every breath, every thought, all aligned, all unified, all focused into a single point." Her right hand rose above her head. Her palm was open, facing down. Her fingers were straight and tight together. "This technique requires 20 years to learn. It requires breaking the body and rebuilding it stronger. It requires meditation that most minds cannot survive. It requires understanding pain so deeply that pain becomes meaningless." Watched from the edge of the arena. Her earlier contempt was gone. Something ancient and instinctive was screaming at her to move away, to run, to get as far from this small human as possible. "The stone breaker is powerful," said. "It uses the natural density of your bones to create force, but Pa does not use natural strength. It creates force from alignment, from unity, from the absolute refusal to stop." Her eyes closed. The arena seemed to hold its breath. Then opened her eyes, and they were different, harder, older, as if something ancient was looking out through them. She struck. Her palm came down toward the reinforced stone floor. It was not a fast movement. It was not a powerful movement. It looked almost gentle, like she was pressing her hand against water. But when her palm touched the stone, the world changed. The sound was not thunder. It was deeper than thunder. It was the sound of something fundamental breaking, something that was never meant to break. A shockwave exploded outward from her hand. Cadets in the front rows felt it pass through their bodies like a wave of pressure. The lights in the arena flickered. And the floor cracked. Not just cracked, fractured, split. A jagged line raced outward from his palm, spreading across the reinforced stone like lightning frozen in rock. The line ran 15 meters to her left, then 15 meters to her right. The ancient floor, built to withstand plasma weapons and gravity hammers, broke in two. Cadets screamed. Some fell as the ground shifted beneath them. Alarms began blaring. Emergency systems activated, flooding the arena with red warning lights. Stumbled backward, staring at the destruction. Her stone breaker could crack training dummies. This human had just broken a floor that was 300 years old. Stood slowly. Her hand was unmarked, not a scratch, not a bruise. She looked at the fractured stone beneath her feet, then up at the stunned crowd. Earth training is not easy, she said. Earth training is not primitive. Earth training taught us one simple truth. She paused, letting her words reach every corner of the silent arena. Everything can be broken. Stone can be broken. Armor can be broken. Even species that think they are unbreakable can be broken. The only question is whether you are willing to become the weapon that breaks them. No one spoke. No one moved. The only sounds were the alarms and the settling of broken stone. Then, from the back of the crowd, began to clap. It was a lonely sound at first, one pair of hands in a sea of silence. But then another cadet joined. Then another. Then, still sitting on the floor where he had fallen, began clapping too. Then was the last. She stared at for a long moment, her stone face unreadable. Then she raised her massive hands and struck them together, slowly, deliberately. The sound built and built until the entire arena was filled with applause. Bow just once the old way, the way her grandmother had taught her. When she raised her head, she saw standing at the tunnel entrance. The giant's face showed something she had never seen there before. And in the observation deck above, Director smiled for the first time in 50 years. The human had done something impossible, and the galaxy would never look at Earth the same way again. 3 months passed, and the Galactic Military Academy was not the same. Classes were no longer empty. Every session was oversubscribed, with waiting lists that stretched for weeks. Cadets who had once laughed at primitive Earth training now woke before dawn to practice breathing exercises. They held stances until their muscles screamed. They learned to fall, to roll, to flow like water around obstacles. And slowly, they began to understand. Became one of its most dedicated students. The young attended every class, stood in the front row, and practiced longer than anyone else. She had seen something in Arena Prime that changed her, not just the cracked floor, but the look in its eyes. The absolute certainty of a creature that knew it could not be defeated because it had already survived everything. One evening, after a particularly hard training session, approached privately. "I owe you an apology," the said. Her voice was quieter than usual. "I mocked you. I called your methods primitive. I was wrong." Shook her head. "You were not wrong to question. You were only wrong to stop questioning." "I do not understand." "You believed your strength made you safe. You stopped asking what would happen if your strength was not enough. That is the real danger, not weakness, but the belief that you do not need to grow." Looked up at her towering student. "Now you ask questions again. Now you grow. That is all any teacher can hope for. Was silent for a moment. Then she did something no had done in front of a human in recorded history. She bowed, not a small nod of acknowledgement, but a full bow of respect, her stone plates scraping against each other as she bent her massive body. "Teach me more," she said, "please." And smiled. Across the station, other changes were happening. Cadet no longer walked with his head down. The young human had started teaching basic Korean martial arts to younger cadets, passing on what had taught him. His classes were small at first, just a handful of curious aliens who wanted to understand how humans moved. But word spread, and soon his training room was full every evening. One day, a cadet twice his size tried to push him in the hallway, the same way he had been pushed 100 times before. But this time, did not stumble. He redirected the push, used the alien's momentum against him, and sent the bully spinning into the wall. They stared at him in shock. "Earth training," said calmly and walked away. News of the Arena Prime incident spread beyond the academy. Other military institutions across the galaxy requested recordings of the demonstration. They watched the small human crack the floor. They watched her move through 5 opponents like wind through leaves. They began asking questions that had not been asked in centuries. What else could humans do? What other techniques were hiding on that death world called Earth? The Galactic Military Academy officially added Terran combat philosophy to its core curriculum. It was the first human-originated course in the Academy's 300-year history. 1 month later, Director requested a private meeting with. They met in the director's chambers high above the station, where windows looked out at the endless stars. "I have lived for 600 years," said. Her ancient body floated gently in the low gravity she preferred. "I have seen species with natural weapons that could tear warships apart. I have seen warriors with psychic abilities that could kill with a thought. I have seen fighters who could manipulate gravity itself." She paused, her old eyes fixed on the small human before her. "But I have never seen anyone split stone with philosophy before." Shook her head. It was not philosophy. Then what was it? It was 10,000 generations of humans refusing to die. Walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, invisible and far away, was Earth, her home, her grandmother's home, the home of every ancestor who had fought and survived so that she could stand here today. "We had no claws, so we made spears. We had no armor, so we made walls. We had no speed, so we made traps. And when none of those things were enough, we learned to make weapons from our own bodies." She turned back to, "The galaxy calls Earth a death world. They think that means our planet is dangerous, but they miss the truth. Earth is not dangerous because of its predators or its weather or its gravity. Earth is dangerous because it created us. It created a species that looks at impossible odds and says, 'We will find a way.'" Was quiet for a long moment, then she floated closer to. "Earth Command has sent me a request," she said. "Other academies want human instructors. 5 requests so far. By next year there will be 50. She paused. "You have started something, Commander Park, something that will spread across the galaxy." "Good," said. "It is time they understood." "Understood what?" Looked out at the stars one last time. "That humans are not weak, we never were. We are simply patient. We wait. We learn. We adapt. And when the time comes, we show the universe what 10,000 years of survival has created." She bowed to the director and walked to the door. The next morning, stood in her training hall and looked at her students. And a dozen other species, all standing in formation, all waiting for her instruction. Among them, in the front row, stood, finally proud of his human heritage. And beside him stood the who had once called her primitive. They were not the same cadets who had laughed at her 3 months ago. They had learned. They had grown. They had begun to understand what it truly meant to be relentless. Smiled at them and took her position at the front of the room. "Today," she said, "we begin again. Same stance, Same breathing, same discipline, every day a little stronger, every day a little harder to break. The cadets bowed and took their positions. Outside the window, the stars burned cold and distant. The galaxy was vast and old and filled with species who had forgotten what it meant to struggle. They had evolved past hardship. They had technology that made strength unnecessary. But humans remembered. Humans would always remember. And now the galaxy was going to learn. Closed her eyes and breathed. The future was bright, and Earth's children were ready to meet it.